stumbled upon the McCabe trilogy by Maya Banks, and I just finished In Bed with a Highlander. Don't even try to disguise it as anything else.
I don't think they want to disguise it. I think you want to know.
That's why I picked it, because I was like, you know what? I know what I'm getting.
You're getting In Bed with a Highlander.
Exactly.
Does he cut anyone's heads off?
No.
It's not that kind of Highlander.
No, but it sounds like he could if he wanted to.
Sure.
I just borrowed Seduction of a Highland Lass and then Never Love a Highlander.
No, you shouldn't.
I'm fully ensconced in this world now, and we'll need to finish it because I need to know what happens to everybody.
I think they bang.
Oh, they do. Oh, they bang.
That's what happens.
They bang. It's a lot of the book. And now everyone knows probably what I'm listening to if they see me this month.
All right. Well, that's not what we're talking about today, though. But let's get started, and welcome to another episode of I Love This, You Should Too. With me is my lovely co-host, Samantha, the Highland Lass, Randhawa.
I am kind of a Highland Lass. I do have a lot of Scottish ancestry.
And I'm your other co-host, Indy. Never fall in love with a Highlander, Randhawa.
You never have.
No, because they'll cut your heads off, or their head gets cut off.
One of the two.
I have a different Highlander that I'm familiar with. Maybe you'd like to watch that sometime.
I would like to watch that.
You probably wouldn't.
No?
No. Although, the TV series, I think there's parts of it that you would actually really enjoy.
Oh, okay.
But that's not what we're talking about. What are we talking about, Sam?
We are talking about the 2002 action-adventure movie Hero.
Oh, action-adventure. I guess it is.
Google tells me.
That's what Google says.
Yeah.
I would refer to it as a wuxia movie.
I don't know what that means, so.
Oh, well, what a good place to start. No, wait. We're gonna take a step back. This was my choice. Lately, I've just been doing I used to really like this movie. Is it still good? Let's watch it and find out. For when it's my turn to pick the movie. So this was one of those. I really enjoyed Hero in 2002. And you know what? Still do. Still love it. Now, Samantha, you have not watched many wuxia or martial arts films. Possibly none.
I may have seen it on TV for a little bit.
Sure.
I don't think I've sat down to watch a martial arts
You haven't gone to a
movie.
theater and watched a Bruce Lee retrospective.
No, exactly. I think just flipping through the channels, maybe I saw some. And, there's good acrobatics and stuff. So, I may have paused for a moment because I find that interesting. But I definitely have not sat down and watched an entire movie.
So for your first one, what are your thoughts?
I liked it. It was a little kind of confusing at the beginning. I don't know if it was the subtitles. I've talked about this before. I have a hard time with subtitles. So I feel like my visual processing gets impeded a little bit with the reading aspect along with the visual aspect of the movie. So it took me a little bit longer to get into it. But once I was into it, I enjoyed it and I understood the story and I knew what was going on, which is step one of movies. But I liked it. I thought it was an interesting story, and I thought it was a very beautiful movie.
That it most certainly is. Well, let's get into the movie. I wasn't sure of how to talk about this one because so many of the things that I would bring to you, I would have all this film history. And we're jumping into 2002, which is late into this style of filmmaking. So I think we're going to kind of skip the history stuff because eventually I want to do just a full episode on the life of Bruce Lee and then one of his movies as well, because that was my jam when I was a kid more than anything. I really watched a lot of Bruce Lee movies and I still think they're great. And he's just a really interesting figure. So we're not going to get too much into the film history, but maybe I'll start by giving you a bit of context. Then we can go over the movie. First, I was thinking, how we do it. We do the ideological stuff. We'll talk about the visuals. We'll talk about the sound. But since this movie is so nicely divided into chapters for us with the color coding,
yes,
we can just go chapter by chapter, maybe.
Let's go.
So when I said wuxia, that is the term for not just martial arts movies, because wuxia movies are martial arts movies, but not all martial arts are wuxia. So this literally means martial arts and chivalry, and it's a genre of Chinese fiction, and it gets a lot of historical fantasy, and then it gets adapted into all sorts of things like Chinese opera and television, and it does now kind of expand outside of China as well. And the most important thing I want to get across, because we're not going to get into all of that history, is when I was trying to sell you on this movie, I was trying to say, like, think of it as a musical. Because I know if people watch this movie, you'd be like, well, you can't walk on water. This movie's dumb. But people don't break it into songs either.
No.
So just as we're impressed of like, hey, you know what? Hugh Jackman is a great singer and dancer, and that's impressive. I want to stress that all of these people went to school to do what they are doing. This isn't a bunch of stunt people coming in. This isn't just CGI figures in their place. All of these people are doing the things. Of course, they're not walking on water, but they are doing very advanced acrobatics while suspended on wires. And when you go to school for this kind of thing, often you are also doing singing and dancing and Chinese opera, because that kind of combines all of this. So these, especially these lead actors, are just incredibly talented. You know that a bunch of them are just my favorite actors already.
Yes.
And then the fact that they can do all of this makes them that much more impressive. And this came out at a point where there was a big resurgence in this kind of movie and its appeal to American audiences and worldwide audiences. Of course, in China, it's not gone away. But after the success of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, American distributors thought they could make money off of these things. So then they started bringing these movies over, which usually were just getting a Chinese release. Because this was made in 2002 and was released in China then, but it wasn't until 2004 that it got a large American release. And it was very successful. I think it was the first Chinese film to ever open at #1 in American box offices. So it was riding that Crouching Tiger kind of wave, but also very... like it held its own and was very successful.
Google tells me that Quentin Tarantino convinced Miramax to bring it to the US.
His involvement in a lot of Asian cinema getting over here is both true and overstated, I think.
Okay.
Because he had this whole Rolling Thunder's Pictures, which he was trying to get a lot of these lesser seen movies here. And one of those movies was Chungking Express, my favorite movie of all time. And he was watching these things and was a big part of it. But I think the biggest thing is that Crouching Tiger won an Oscar.
Right.
And it was everywhere. So then people are like, hey, we can make money off the Chinese. Let's bring it over.
Yeah.
All that is to say that this movie, which could very easily never have been seen by American audiences in as far as a theatrical release goes, went on to be very successful, was nominated for awards, made millions of dollars, and I don't know, is it remembered now? I don't hear people talk about it, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I haven't heard of it before we did it here.
Yeah, but it should be because it's great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And if Sam enjoys it, then you know it's good.
Then you'll probably enjoy it. Viewers, listeners.
And of course, this was directed by Zhang Yimou, who has done lots of great stuff. I feel like his movies really tapered off in as far as their quality goes later on. He did this Great Wall epic. I think it was called The Great Wall. And man, it was so bad. How do you make Raise the Red Lantern and Judo and Hero and then that? Oh, wow. It was rough. Also, the cinematography, and of course I think this movie looks beautiful, was done by maybe my favorite cinematographer, Christopher Doyle, who does the majority of Wong Kar-wai's movies. So maybe let's start off just going through the movie. There's kind of 6-ish chapters, almost, I'd say. You have the black chapter, which is the framing story. There's the gray or brown area when it's the fight with Sky. I know I am going to forget the names of the characters a lot, so maybe I'll just say them all at the beginning because I often refer to the actors rather than the characters. So Sky is Donnie Yen. That is the first battle. Jet Li, of course, is our nameless protagonist. Tony Leung, my favorite actor, is Broken Sword. Maggie Cheung is flying snow, and Zhang Ziyi is moon, sometimes translated as fading moon in certain ones.
And Zhang Ziyi and Tony Leung were in another movie we watched.
Well, Tony Leung and Maggie Cheung were both in the Mood for Love.
Right.
And 2046. Zhang Ziyi also is in 2046 with Tony Leung.
Okay. I knew I'd seen those three somewhere.
Yes. Very recently. We're doing a lot of Tony Leung this year, which I am here for.
It's the year of Tony.
It always is in my heart.
I know it is.
We even saw a Tony Leung movie in the theater because he was Mandarin in Shang-Chi.
Oh, that's right.
He went to the Marvel Universe and really was the best part of that movie. Because the movie was...
He was pretty great.
He's good. Man, he is just a presence.
Him and Simu.
Yeah. But we're back to this. There's the gray. Red is kind of the lie that Nameless is telling. There's the blue where the king is giving his interpretation. There's the white section, which is the true history. And there's a green flashback as well. First off, how did you like the color coding? Or was that something that even jumped out to you?
I could tell that the story was changing. I didn't really grasp onto the fact that it was like truth or lies or anything like that.
Okay.
I give a lot of like notice to the fact that like I don't always get everything because I'm reading, but I liked the color differences and I definitely clocked them, but I don't think that I noticed how the colors corresponded with what was the meaning was, I guess.
I would agree in that like the blue area doesn't mean it's all sad or the green one. I think the colors are not arbitrary, but they don't have the same meanings that we always put on those colors. Like the white is all good and pure or anything like that. I think their colors are used based on the environment that suited them. That's another interesting thing because this movie is about the unification of China and all of these colored areas are all around China, like all up into Mongolia even for some of it, for the yellows. But we can go through it, and then if we have any points where it's not clear what was going on, because this movie is one of those, like it's usually called Rashomon style, but you haven't seen Rashomon yet. That just means that there are multiple tellings of the same story. We get to see the same thing happen a few different times from different people's points of view, or sometimes they're just straight up lying, and that never happened.
Oh. Okay.
So first there is the black area, and this is that framing story where Nameless is meeting the king. And this is kind of historically accurate to be black. That particular dynasty, China's first. And again, I'm going to say things about ancient Chinese history I don't really know. I have a basic understanding, but I'm not an expert, so I'm going to get things wrong every now and then. Don't write a paper on what I'm saying in the history part. Okay. When it comes to praising Tony Leung, yeah, you can quote me on all that. That's true.
I'll continue writing my paper about Tony Leung then.
Well, I meant more our audience. But...
Okay, great.
So
my thesis at this point.
The Qin dynasty favored black. They wanted to wear all black. They used all black horses. And
it's very intimidating.
Yeah. And it gives a kind of a unity more, like you look as one.
Yes.
And Zhang even went to the extent of painting all the horses black so they would be how they should be.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Now that I know you love crazy directors being like crazy on a grand scale, I'm going to give you all of those tips because you mentioned it with the tulips in Wicked.
Yes, yeah.
So
and
now...
I really appreciate the not using CG because we can just do it ourselves and that would be great.
Yeah.
That idea.
Let's talk about that first because this intro feels epic. It is in a huge scale.
Huge. Yeah.
We were talking about Lord of the Rings, Saving Private Ryan, things like that when we were watching it. But it's not shot like a modern epic. It doesn't look like Lord of the Rings. It looks real. And Lord of the Rings is a very good looking movie. I'm not saying that's not one of these super glossy CG movies, although it of course uses some. But like those Avengers movies where everything is so clean that it doesn't look real.
Right. Where it's hard to assume that this could actually happen.
Yeah. And we've gotten to the point where CG in a movie like that looks great and realistic. Yet I'm not sure if it's because I'm older and think of grainy film as being more real than this sort of thing, but nothing in a Marvel movie has weight to it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It doesn't feel real, although it looks absolutely real. This, I thought, looked real because it relies on very little CG. The soldiers are mostly just actual Chinese army.
Okay.
That's how they got them.
They're just like, hey, you're
there's a million of you guys.
Today
You're going to
is
do this.
to do this. Yeah.
That'd be a pretty good assignment.
That's pretty great. And you're going to like get to go to wardrobe and ride a horse and just like hang out.
Yeah.
Have a feather on your hat. On your, what is it, like a helmet?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Feather on your helmet. I want to be respectful of the army.
You don't want the Chinese army angry at you.
I really don't, especially since we're going to that part of the world soon.
They don't listen to this.
Okay, great. Yet.
But I also think that there's something to be said about the film grain. This has grain to it. It looks like an older movie, even though to me 2002 isn't old, but they haven't digitally cleaned up the film stock, which is kind of a more regular practice now.
Yeah.
So because of that, it doesn't feel fake ever.
It felt very old-timey. Like it felt like we were actually looking at the world as it was in, was it like 200 something?
Yeah, and this was built on sets too. Like that set was built.
Oh.
So the backgrounds, everything is real. When they're using CG, it's probably for little cleanup things, erasing the wires, stuff like that. The people are doing these movements and the backgrounds are real. And to me, at least, I can feel it. It feels different.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciated how you could tell that they were doing it. It wasn't just computer added, all of the movements and everything. And then also you said when we first started watching the movie that like, yeah, that's just 1,000 people. That's not CG. They're not like duplicating a crowd. They're not saying like, here's 10 people and we're going to make it like 1,000 times over. It actually just is 1,000 people. And so I was like really impressed with that. And I did think that sometimes maybe I missed a little bit of the story just because I was looking at like everything that was happening in the background. Because there was so much background.
Yeah.
And I always really enjoy when I know that it's not CG. I always enjoy looking at all the actors in the background because there's a good chance that someone's not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Because like, how do you control 1,000 people? And
well, ask the Chinese government. They're controlling a lot more.
And
that's why they probably were so good at it.
This may have been different because they are Chinese army and the government is in charge of them. But I always enjoy in these like big epic things where they actually do have that amount of extras in there to play those parts that you always see something that's kind of funny. You're like off to the side happening. And so this was definitely a movie where I was looking for that.
In this opening sequence, I also really loved the contrast it has within itself and to the rest of the story. Like you were saying, there's so many people in the background, and then you get into the rest of the movie, and there's usually only one or two people on the screen at a time.
Yeah.
And you get these grand vistas or very interesting backgrounds. And within this sequence and at the end, I loved those parts where it was just Jet Li against this seemingly endless army of faceless soldiers.
Yeah, that was really impressive.
So Jet Li's character is telling the story of how he killed these assassins. And with each story, he gets to go closer and closer to the king. And the first story he tells is the battle with Sky, played by Donnie Yen. And this sequence is probably the best actual fight. If you talk to martial arts people, they'll say that this is the best one. To me, it's not though, because it's not the most interesting. They are just technically the best. Jet Li and Donnie Yen are both just top of the line martial arts actors.
Okay. Yeah, everyone seemed to be very, very good at what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you compare them side by side, you will see how much more intricate and fast this particular fight is. But it's not as stylized as the others. And as someone who's more of a movie person than a fight person, I appreciated those other ones more. But still, this one was, of course, amazing. I really enjoyed how there's a musician playing and the sound is just water rippling down in the rain. And the musician, it's not this grand score of an epic fight.
This was a very quiet movie.
Yeah, most of the time.
Even though there's like big, huge things happening, I do, and you and I call it like robot music, but like in these Marvel movies, and I talked about this when I was still sick with long COVID, the sound also really affected me in those movies. It wasn't just the movement and why I didn't watch those movies for a couple of years. It was also the sound I found very like discerning and like discombobulating. And so this was a really nice movie to watch because you could really focus on what they were doing, and then you also got the nature sounds with it. Yeah.
I love the sound mix of this movie. It's something we don't see very often, hear very often. But for this fight, it's just the swords, a little bit of like the shuffling of their feet, water, and then that musician comes in, but he's playing just a one stringed instrument, so it's not this big orchestral thing.
I just hate when they use like bass to amplify how high stakes something is.
Just that concert.
Just like, yeah. And that, I hate that. And I always leave a movie feeling like I can't hear properly because it's like, it's been so loud. And this, I feel like I would really like to see in a theater because it would be really enjoyable.
Yeah. I love a score that accentuates what you are already feeling rather than tells you what to feel. And I feel like especially modern horror and action really go the wrong way on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I love the sound design in this. And then we get that kind of black and white sequence where, in case you weren't clear, that this section is like the unemotional one, because everything kind of has its own feel to it. This one is much more... I was going to say it's black and white, but it literally is black and white. He's not subtle with his use of color in this at all. He's showing you I'm doing something different in each section, so I'm drawing attention to it. And this one is the least emotional, so it's black and white. And it's like they're playing a game of chess because these are maybe the two best fighters. So their fight, they're saying, it's so good. Like, we don't have to do it. We're going to do it in our minds. And they have a fight in their minds, which you can call silly if you want. I get it, but it's very much like a chess, or they're playing a game. Oh man, I thought I was so smart saying like, oh, it's like a chess battle. It's black and white. And then I was gonna draw an analogy to how Nameless is always moving forward to the king. He moves a few paces each time, and he's trying to get the king, like in chess. And then the king counters at the end. But they're actually playing a Chinese game with black and white pieces. I don't know the name of that game, but they're playing it in that scene, and then it goes into the black and white fight. So I thought I was catching something subtle, but no, it was showing you right there. I also loved in that sequence when Jet Li's flying through the raindrops and he's moving faster than the rain. So you can see the raindrops kind of exploding on his face as he moves forward, and they're almost frozen in time because he's going so fast.
It was very cool. Again, another moment where we didn't use really loud sounds to like show you how fast he was moving.
Just little water. Splish,
yeah.
splish, splish.
Like, we can see it. We know how fast he's moving because of that. We don't need the like
or whooshing sounds.
Yeah, like we don't need the extra sound effects in order to know what he's doing because we can see.
I feel like the sound design of this movie is not talked about enough. I guess it's when the visuals look like they do, you kind of forget about the sound, but they both work great. And I think that's the strength of the sound design, is letting those visuals speak for themselves and not overpowering them.
Yeah.
So that all was a lie that Nameless was telling.
Right.
Because in reality, we learn later that Sky allowed himself to be killed. Although I guess those things did happen. It's just we didn't hear the conversation beforehand or during that we get later in the movie.
Right.
Then we go into the red chapter. This is another one of Nameless's lies. This is the section with Broken Sword, Tony Leung, Flying Snow, Maggie Cheung, and Fading Moon, Zhang Ziyi, and they are in the kind of calligraphy school. So in this lie, Nameless is saying that, they had broken up, but they were still in the same place, and it's about jealousy and hatred, and that's what he used to destroy these two powerful assassins. And you can always say that this is the red one, so it's about passion and jealousy and rage. And it is, but I don't think all of the colors correspond as nicely with their theme. I loved the costumes in this one. I think this might have been my favorite section for costuming. Although blue was really good too.
Yeah. But the red ones with all the sleeves and everything, like it was just beautiful.
And Maggie Cheung's makeup and appearance changes drastically from these ones. She has that thick eyeliner to the point in this one. And even the camera has changed a lot. In the last section, it was mostly a static camera with the people moving. This one, the camera itself has like more passion to it almost. It's moving around a lot more.
When you mention that, it does remind me that, every single section, I did notice that the filming style kind of changed. And how people moved changed. And then the kind of shots where they'd like zoom back changed as well. Like you got different distances from the characters, I guess.
Definitely.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Maybe to jump on what you were saying, I think it has to do with the settings most, because we have the large but enclosed rooms in the Black story, and here the calligraphy school is kind of the smallest of the areas, and it has
these little rooms and little hallways.
Yeah, the corridors are much smaller, everything's much tighter. And in the later stories, like the blue one, we still have these same characters and they're doing similar things, but suddenly they're outdoors and we get to see these grand vistas behind them. So this is, I think, the most claustrophobic of the chapters.
Right.
And there's so much in this one I loved. I loved that all of those people die doing their calligraphy. They're just so committed that they just withstand this barrage of arrows, or don't withstand it, they die. Or when Maggie Cheung's fighting off arrows with her sleeves.
Yeah.
That sounds so dumb, but it's so beautiful.
I want my sleeves to be arrow proof.
Well, you got to train a lot to do that.
Apparently, yeah.
I loved when Tony Leung is doing calligraphy so hard, it's like he's in the action scene.
Yeah.
They film it like he's like a sword fight.
Yeah.
Which is something that they talk about, how he gives away his fighting style through his calligraphy. And in that sequence, Tony Leung also gives this look that he's given in many movies where he's saying, I can't get over this great woman, even though I'm with this other really hot lady. Yeah. He has a look that is for that moment. Because for sure. That moment has happened many times in his career. And after he's with Zhang Ziyi, he's like all broody. Yeah. And man, he broods well.
He has that like, I'm always looking over my shoulder for her kind of look. That's like I'm trying to move forward with my life, but she's always there, just behind me.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for her.
Man, if I had known that I would get 3 or 4 more Tony Leung, Maggie Cheung love stories in this, I would have done this right after 2046. Because we get to see them almost meet in, what's the first one? The first one of that trilogy. Then we get to see their whole love story in The Mood for Love, which is one of the best movies ever made. Go watch that. And then we get to see hypothetical things in 2046. And now we get 4 versions of their love story. One where they hate each other, one when they're madly in love, one when they're kind of contentious. So yeah. You get to see so much of these two. Let's just put them in all love stories. Should be these two.
Okay, great.
I'm in for it.
Let's do it.
And in this red sequence, I think because jealousy and passion are the things that rule here, it also has maybe the least honorable death. Everything else is very face-to-face, but here she stabs him through a wall, Polonius style. And it's like, what a shitty way to kill someone who still loves you. Yeah. And I love that sequence when the blood pools at his boot and the blood is black rather than red, because everything's so red that this is like the blood is not nearly as red as it should be. And I like when he's dying, all he says is, "We have both been very foolish."
Oh, yeah.
That's his takeaway on their broken relationship. And yeah, they were.
Yeah.
But in this one, I don't think the Jet Li fight, which comes at the end, isn't the climax of it. I think it is the Maggie Cheung Zhang Ziyi fight. Because this version of Moon, she is his lover, Broken Sword's lover, and she goes after Maggie Cheung to avenge his death. And I loved how she comes at it with such rage. She is crying or screaming. She has the two swords and she's going crazy.
Yeah.
And then Flying Snow is just subtle, stone-faced, just parrying her off and like putting in no effort because like she's above this whole thing. Because she's already lost what she loves the most and just doesn't care about this.
Right.
Oh, and for another director's being crazy thing, they filmed this in a forest in Mongolia, and they had to wait for the leaves to turn yellow.
Oh.
And then they're like, that's not enough leaves. So he hired all these like local nomads. Can he be a local nomad? I don't know.
I think you can be nomadic in an area.
Yeah,
like indigenous people followed pathways, right?
Sure.
Like through the country, and they went back and forth based on the seasons. So I think you can be a local nomad in that you don't go like way over there.
Yeah.
Because you just go back and forth or around.
So he hired all these local nomads to go and collect leaves. Like, go wherever you can, bring me leaves. And he just had hundreds of people bringing him leaves for these shots. Because you're not going to do it in post. I'm not going to CG these leaves. I need real leaves.
Yeah.
And you know what? It worked for me, so I loved it. And then as she dies, the leaves turn red, which was a nice little end to that sequence. And then there's still the whole Jet Li fight, but in this sequence, the Jet Li fight wasn't the big deal.
No.
I thought it was the Maggie Cheung Zhang Ziyi fight.
Yeah, that was a beautiful fight too. And I don't know if it's because they're just like so graceful and artistic in what they're doing, and that they like really mirrored each other and did a really good job of like doing the same things, which I'm not sure that you could do with like a man and a woman fighting.
Oh, I thought this was the biggest contrast to me.
Oh, see,
because
I felt
she was
like...
so furious and moving so quickly, and then Snow was slow and graceful and methodical.
So what I took from it was, yes, they had very different fighting styles, and they were very different in their like intention of fighting. But you could see, I don't know which one was the younger. Sorry,
Moon.
So you could see Moon watching and learning throughout the fight. And you could see her kind of emulating some of that style towards the end of the fight. And that was kind of what was really like interesting about it.
Maybe she wanted like to be Snow throughout, like through her life. She's wanted to be in her position.
Like a very like master teacher kind of like teacher student kind of relationship fight.
I think that's...
Does that make sense? Like, I feel like I'm...
Very much, because she is literally the student.
Yeah.
She's the calligraphy student, but she's the young one. She is the student.
And it felt like towards the end of the fight, it got harder, like physically harder, because she was unknowingly teaching Moon her ways by showing her how she fights. Right? And so then it felt like at the end, it was very much like it was a hard fight. Harder than it was at the beginning, just because she had let so many of like, I don't know, secrets is probably the wrong word, but like techniques go.
Absolutely, because that's what Nameless is telling him too, right? He's saying through his calligraphy, I learned his secrets. So the idea of learning the secrets of a master swords person
yeah, great.
is something that this movie posits, something you learn and then you can defeat them through learning their secrets.
Yeah.
Anything else in the red?
It was just beautiful.
So then back in the black interstitials, the king says like, you're lying, I have found you out, here's what really happened. And then the king posits a story. And it's interesting that in the king's story, he still has a very romantic idea of all of these potential assassins. So this story is what he thinks actually happened. Again, not really the truth, but not Nameless's lie anymore. And it has the same 3 characters. I think it's mostly in the same location. It's more, it's not a calligraphy anymore. It's a library.
Right.
They have all of those scrolls everywhere.
That whole scene, I was just like, man, I'd hate to be the person who just like finished stacking all those up.
Oh, right. When Nameless cuts them all down.
And then like the big thing of arrows that he like spills. I'm like, oh, I just finished picking those up. That's all that kept going through my head was like, someone was in charge of like cleaning up this room and they just like destroyed it. So I felt bad for them.
There's a similar silk clothing in this one, a lot of flowy stuff, but it seems like the wind is softer. There's a lot of wind in that fight with Snow and Moon. Mm-hmm. Here, there's kind of more of a soft breeze, and instead of those narrow corridors, there's mountains and skies. It's much more open. This is kind of an open scene. Everyone's emotions are right at the forefront. It's very romantic in the truest sense of romance, of like whatever you were feeling, just kind of reveling in that. And then this has one of the most gorgeous scenes in film history. Mm-hmm. I don't know, that one where Tony Leung and Jet Li are fighting on the water. That
was, so at the beginning of this movie, I was like, that looks like BC, or like right on the border of BC, between Alberta and BC. And I was like, that could be the Rocky Mountains. And then this scene, I was like, I have camped at lakes where you get up early enough in the morning to like use the washroom or like make coffee or start a fire or whatever. And it's that still. And it's kind of like a magic moment. And I just felt like the magic of that scene and felt like that really added to it.
And going along with what I was saying before, because that magic moment mm-hmm. only happens for a little bit, I think it took them months or a full month to film that scene because they could only do it for a little bit of time every day.
And it doesn't happen every day.
Yeah, so they would have to wait for the weather, for the light, and for everything to be that still. He didn't allow it to have some wind ripples and then we'll just smooth it out with a computer. Mm-hmm. They waited for it to have that mirror reflection on it. And then they have to do all of these things. Like, sure, they are on wires and they are assisted, but they are doing these acrobatics. And maybe it's in my head that I'm giving it this credit because I know these things, but it looks better than, for instance, the first Spider-Man movie, which was around this time. Spider-Man's flying around and doing all these things. Mm-hmm. He looks rubbery to me because he was CG.
Right.
And it's gotten better over the years, of course.
Of course. But also you
can tell these are people. People are doing this and it looks like it.
And I appreciated that. And I was going to talk about that because like, in modern, and I know we're just like shitting on the Marvel franchise right now, but
it's a touchstone that almost everybody knows. So it's easy to compare.
And like when I was sick with vertigo and like didn't have the ability to like transfer my eyes really quickly and like look at different lights and different scenes, I found it really annoying because you got like 0.5 of a second of every single shot. And you know that these shots took hours to set up. And it's just like, just let me see the fight. And we say this every time we leave a Marvel movie. We're like, just let me see what's happening. Yeah. Because you get this like boom, 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 boom. And you've seen like 6 different versions of this fight and 6 different things that are happening in like less than 6 seconds. And it's just so overwhelming. And this let you like really sit in it and really understand what was happening. And you could see the emotion. And they did cut around a little bit, but it was enough that you got to see the emotions on people's faces. You got to see just the scenery. You just got to see their fight. You got to see like a wide shot. You got to see a close up, and it was beneficial to what was happening in the scene as opposed to just like a crazy flash of like almost like a slideshow of what's happening.
Absolutely. If you are cutting so often, in my experience as a terrible filmmaker, it's to hide things. That's why you cut a lot.
Yeah.
And now I guess it's for attention spans, or I don't know what. It's just the
I
style.
find it's so hard to enjoy something that's cut like that.
You can't tell what actually happened.
No.
And I think a lot of the times in those movies, they don't know what happened. And maybe over everything, that's the benefit of real people and real sets over CG. It's not that real people are better and look better, although I think they do. It's that if you are using real people and real sets, everyone has this intention. You know what you are doing and you have a certain intention for that shot. When you can do things after the fact, usually there's like multiple iterations, like, oh, this might work here, oh, this could work here, and you're figuring it out, and those editors and those graphic artists are doing lots of amazing work, but it is different than the director, cinematographer, and actors having the same intention with whatever they do. And if there's anything this sequence shows is great intention on the behalf of all of those people working together for this storyline to make this romantic, dramatic, graceful fight. Because this is a movie about fighting. It's about killing and fighting, yet it is also a movie about pacifism and peace. And the way you can kind of combine those two things is by scenes like this that are just absolutely beautiful and are as at home in a ballet as a kung fu movie.
Oh, for sure. And I could totally imagine all of these people being incredible at ballet.
I bet
Like you can
they've done
see it.
a lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
for sure.
And then in this sequence, he has to stop the fight because a drop of water fell on the corpse of his beloved. And that's just going along with this is the really romantic sequence.
Yeah.
And then he kills himself, because how else would you end the most romantic sequence? By a Romeo and Juliet style suicide.
That's why it's still the most romantic Shakespeare play.
Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
People seem to think it is.
Yeah, but
might be wrong.
it's one of my it's not like the worst. I don't think that, but I think it's on the bottom third of Shakespeare to me. It's good. All Shakespeare's good.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's
No,
not...
I enjoy lots of Shakespeare, but I think that there's a lot more to be gained from other Shakespeare works than Romeo and Juliet.
I think we just get it in school because it's about kids.
Yes.
So maybe that's why. Any final thoughts on the Blue chapter? So romantic.
So romantic.
Is it your favorite?
I think so.
I think so. But then again, I'm only thinking of that one fight. But no, I'm not, because there's also that part where they know they're going to die the next day and they just go to sleep, and the looks on their faces of both like, we're going to die tomorrow, but also it's okay because I have you.
Yeah.
And they convey that with their faces.
No,
Man, I love
it's
those
some
two
beautiful
so much.
acting, and like you really get the mood. Even if you don't, because there was a point, I think, during this where I wasn't reading the subtitles, I was just watching. And like, I think that's okay, because they do a really good job of like acting the feeling and what's happening in the scene. They're very skilled. Good work, you guys.
Good work. You're coming around on Tony Leung, huh?
I like Tony Leung.
A long time ago, the very first movie we saw with him, it was probably Chungking Express a few years ago. And you're like, I don't know what you see in this guy. And then you said John A. McDonald was better looking than him. And then I put out a thing on our Instagram saying like, hot or not. And you had John A. McDonald and I had Tony Leung. I think maybe you've come around on that part too.
We'll see.
You still think John A. McDonald's a real hottie, huh?
No, I don't. I think Tony Leung is better looking.
Finally. It only took 5 years.
But I think you are the best looking.
Well, you're biased and also incorrect. All right, now we have the white chapter, and this one is the truth. This is what actually happened. So the red and blue and gray, black and white ones, all lies. Finally, we get to see some truth. So we get to see those same characters again. They're at a library. I think that's where this part is too. And the visual style changes because there is less slow motion to emphasize special moves or the character's techniques, because it's trying to be more more realistic, I guess. It's still heavily stylized as all of it is, but the stylized portions in the white are more at place in the real world because they're on a sandy backdrop and they're wearing white. It's not like everything in a room is painted red like we had in the other segments.
Right, yeah.
And along with the truth, we get to see a medium version of our couple. Because we had one where they were broken up and intensely jealous to the point of murder. We had one where they are so passionately in love and only live for each other in the blue. And here we have them very much in love, but at odds philosophically, because Broken Sword has become a pacifist. He has seen what war has done, and he used to be full of vengeance, and now he isn't. He doesn't see violence as a means to peace anymore. Perhaps that's why his name is Broken Sword. And they are at odds about it, so much so that she ends up killing him. But it's kind of suicide, right? Because he withdraws his sword, so she kills him. And then, of course, she kills herself too, because still Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
They're still very much
in love and
very over-the-top romantic, because that's the way they live.
Yeah.
And this one maybe is sadder than the blue ending, because the blue ending is very over-the-top in its sadness, and it is. But this one, because they are real flawed people and they come to this end, maybe it feels a little more realistic, because it's the true one as well in their world.
Yeah. This one definitely had the most emotion. I felt the most emotion watching it. And you definitely felt the different viewpoints of people in this scene, and just there was no moment where I was like, why would she do that? It was like, yeah, that's why she did that. There was never a moment where I questioned it. And it was very much a good kind of wrap up to their relationship. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it felt very finite and right.
And then despite the white sequence being the wrap up, we then get a flashback, and Broken Sword is, I think, going over how we get the meet cute kind of Broken Sword and Flying Snow. And this one is the green section, and it is very peaceful and happy at the beginning, and they are younger. Their costumes and hair and facial hair has changed to show that, because we know something happened to Broken Sword to make him no longer want to kill the king. And this is the story of how they got to that point. And it's interesting that all of our heroes, or who's the hero of Hero? Jet Li?
Yeah?
I guess.
I don't know. That's the thing. It felt like mutual destruction in the end. It felt very everyone's in the wrong, but also everyone's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It felt very...
It's not black and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of our characters represent different paths to being a hero, perhaps. Or maybe just different political ideologies, because Nameless is very reactionary. Something bad has happened to him. Now he wants his revenge.
Yeah.
Flying Snow is a revolutionary. She wants to overthrow this. She wants to take out the king, and she's going to kill anyone who's in her way, including the man she loves. And then Broken Sword has become a pacifist in this. And then I guess the king is just representative of, well, it's not really the status quo, because he's the first one. But maybe it is because we're watching this in the 2000s. It's hard to say. But the green sequence I liked in how much landscape there is. We get a lot more wide shots of the land, not just of people. And the camera seems to mirror this too, and having a more peaceful editing style. Until we get to the sequence when they are attacking the king, and they're just chopping through everyone's swords and shields. And I remember when that happened, you had a reaction of whoa, they're just chopping everything down.
Yeah.
Of course, that reaction makes sense. But what I said to you then is that their power is related to their desire and their will rather than their actual strength. It's like a ballet or like a musical. The best singer isn't necessarily the most talented person in the world of the movie. They have the passion inside of them, and the only way it comes out in a musical is through song. Similarly, they have this love for each other and this will for their task. So that's what overpowers the army, saying that their desire is greater than that of this entire army.
Yeah, I agree.
It was also just really cool watching the two of them fight through an army. It was great. I loved that.
Yeah, all the chopping and stuff. Like, and once you're in the mindset of like superhero or like being your will being stronger than an army, that kind of thing.
It's not literal.
It's not literal. It's very much like you said, like a musical where like things just happen and you just are like, yeah, it's a musical.
Yeah.
It was a very powerful scene once you are in that mindset properly. And the idea of him chopping through all of this like armor and everything that's meant to protect the soldiers, it's huge, and it's a big ending, I think.
And through this, or maybe it's in the very end, Broken Sword is saying that the greatest achievement a swordsman can have is peace. We kind of think of fighting as, for fighting. But to a lot of the world, it is an art. It is a method of discipline. And that's kind of what, like how calligraphy is for him in this. It's an art form and a form of expression, right? And he gets to the point where he thinks like, I've gone past all of that now, and now what I'm looking for is peace. I've mastered the sword. And so has Nameless. So Nameless could kill the king, but chooses not to.
Right.
He does that thing because he's gotten to, I think, 10 paces by this point.
10 paces, yeah.
And he can kill someone within 10 paces. And the king even throws the sword down and says like, all right,
let's
do
go.
it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. And he says to the king that you can set an example for the world. So that made me think, oh, so now the king is going to work with Nameless. But no, he has Nameless executed.
Just to like prove a point, I think.
Yeah.
Like it felt very much like he was just trying to execute in order to uphold the rules of the land.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it felt like, okay, in any other situation, if I had my way, he may have been saved and he may become like my best general or something, right? Like you want that guy on your side. But I think it felt like a very much like I have to prove a point here. And I have to show everyone else that like, you can't do this.
Yeah.
This isn't okay. And even though I would love to have that skill on my side, we have to tamp this out where it started.
On his way out, I really love that shot where Nameless is walking down the stairs and there's hundreds of guards, but they leave a circle around him.
Yeah.
And the circle moves. And that empty circle has been something that quite a motif throughout this movie. There's a lot of empty circles around these heroes.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that. I'm thinking about it. Maybe by the end of our conversation, I'll have a take on it. But it's interesting that it happens so often. But yeah, the ending, I guess that's what we can segue into and just talk about the ending and the politics of the movie then as well. Because this movie was very much criticized as being like pro-totalitarian. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a state-sanctioned movie.
Of course. Well, I mean, if you're using the army, I assume it is.
And to just get a release like this in China, you have to have governmental approval.
Right.
So Zheng's works had been controversial in China before Hero, but none of them were ever criticized as being sympathetic to totalitarian governments. This one was. In the past, a lot of his movies were kind of critical of cultural tradition in China, and the criticisms of him were that he was anti-Chinese. So now this movie comes out and everyone's like, oh, look what he's doing. He's just a puppet of the Chinese government, which, like, again, at the end, it's about the greater good and he's sacrificing himself for the good of society. And that is a a principle that is just much more a part of non-Western art.
Right.
Like, we consume mostly American media.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our hero stories are American, and it is about usually a lone figure who is exceptional. It's cowboy movies, it's Die Hard, it's whatever. It's one guy who takes on the larger thing and stands up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's not what like American politics actually do, but that's
yeah.
But when it is something that is foreign, Americans and the Western world is much more willing to criticize it, because you have like that same first Spider-Man movie. There's a big shot of him landing on an American flag and doing the "Don't mess with New York," and we're just like, "Yay, great! We love him. We love Spider-Man," because I actually not love Spider-Man. Yeah. But when another country does something patriotic, we tend to be very critical of it, and this is one of those.
Yeah.
So first, we can talk about the king. So it's Qin, and my friend Qian taught me that Q is usually it's. Oh. Sometimes it gets modified into a ch, so like chin, but I think it's qin. I think. Again, I spent like 2 weeks of my life in China. I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't.
I just know from my one friend. That's how she says her name.
I don't have any reference for it, but like if you're out there and you know better, let us know.
At least we're not going to say Quinn, because I'm sure that makes people upset more.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, the
it's
Quinn
either Qin
dynasty.
or Qin. So the Qin king is a real person. This is not that person. They changed the names. Nameless is based on a real assassin, but it's not that assassin. They changed the name, so already we are going away from just history. This is not a historical document. This is a takeoff, and we could say that the monarchy is a symbol of monarchy rather than of that actual king. Because people say like, well, that king was a terrible person, so how dare this movie give him more power?
Right.
But if you look at it, all of the bad things about that king were written by the next dynasty, who, of course, hated the previous one. So might be true, might not. Who knows? The truth's probably somewhere in between. But this is not about that specific king. The biggest controversial thing was the idea of, oh man, I'm going to do it again. Tenxia.
Okay.
That's the Chinese word that, this is interesting, that on my DVD, it says our land, but in the Blu-ray one we just watched that had a different Chinese translation, it's all under heaven, which is what it actually translates to. I did look this up.
Okay.
So when I saw it in the theaters, they were saying like, yes, we're doing this for our land. And it's like, oh yeah, it's China. But when you switch our land to all under heaven, it sounds much more authoritarian, much more like we are going to get everything. All under heaven is ours, not just our land. All of this will be ours.
Right.
So that changes the meaning a good bit too. But that term, all under heaven, is a part of Chinese history. So of course that's the word they're going to use here. One other thing I did notice that they changed in the versions I've seen is when the army all chants something. In old versions, I'd seen it translated as like something like go or like storm, fight. But in this version, which is more accurate, it's translated as hail. But they didn't want to put that in American theaters because we think of the only person you hail is a Hail Hitler. And that's going to draw more of those authoritarian lines into this.
Right.
And I guess you can, in a reading that says that this movie is pro-authoritarian, you could make the argument that it doesn't really show people, just like some guy. There's no just regular people in this movie. It's a faceless wall of soldiers or these larger-than-life heroes, and that's it. We don't get any of the individuals. A lot of the imagery at the beginning and at the end in the black segments are very much like Nazi propaganda films, specifically Triumph of the Will, which is a very good movie. It is a Nazi propaganda film, but it's still a good movie. And it has to be intentional because the amount of work that's put into every shot of this, nothing's just like, oh, that happens to look like something.
Right. That's a thing.
Yeah. But do those inclusions make this pro-authoritarian or anti? I don't think that's as clear as a lot of other people think. Like, by putting in someone who has some like Nazi imagery with them, does that automatically mean we are agreeing with them? Because Star Wars uses that all the time, and that is a very anti-authoritarian movie.
Right.
So just the inclusion, I don't think you can say means that it is in service of it. It's just saying that this person has similarities with that. So is the movie at the end, when Nameless and the other characters really are essentially martyrs for this cause of all under heaven, that we will not fight because fighting has gotten us nowhere, we should all be unified? Mm-hmm. Is the martyrdom of them for the king or anti-king? And I don't think it's as clear as everybody seems to think. Everybody seems to think that this is like, yes, we're bowing down to him. But he killed Nameless. Mm-hmm. He was meant to set an example for the world, and he does the wrong thing. He is violent. The movie, most specifically Broken Sword and then Nameless, they are the ones teaching the pacifism, but they are enemies of the king. So I think you could look at it as an anti-authoritarian one as well, but just pro-peace. Like having a movie all about fighting, and in the end, it's about pacifism, is a wild thing. But
that is wild.
I think that reading, to me at least, holds a little more water than this is Chinese propaganda and everyone is bowing down to the emperor. Mm-hmm. Because the emperor doesn't seem like a great guy. He doesn't seem like he is this larger than life leader that is going to pull everyone together. Mm-hmm. It took these other people to do it, not the king. The king worked against them. Mm-hmm. But maybe the king also learned from them.
Right.
So I think dismissing this as pro-Chinese government propaganda is very reductive. And I feel like Western media does not get the same scrutiny as this does.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. And I think it's because it's a different culture. Like, people are like, oh, well, USA, because we understand it. Whereas this is like something that people don't know day to day. Mm-hmm. So and it gets a different lens, because what we hear in the media about China is like very different than what we would hear in the media about the US. And I think there's more of a threat there. And maybe it's just modern day China, but in very literal terms, we are Canadians living in 2025. Oh my God, it's 2025.
Who threatens us more? The Americans or the Chinese?
The Americans?
The Americans are literally saying, their incumbent president is saying like, yeah, we're just going to go take all your land.
Yeah, you're going to be the 51st state.
Yeah.
Like.
So maybe we need to, and again, I am no fan of the modern Chinese government. So let's not say like, oh, I like them. But what I am saying is, if we gave the same criticism or looked as closely to American films and compare that with what their government is doing, I don't think it's like, oh yeah, China bad, America good. I think you're all pretty terrible. You're very, very scary governments all around.
And like, we have a very scary incoming government, right?
Sure.
Like,
but I don't think we can compare to China or the US.
No. But I'm just saying, like, we don't have a leg to stand on in this, right? Yeah. Like, we historically tend to swing very liberal and then very conservative. And it goes back and forth like that, or like just being very conservative. And I think that, we should probably stop and take a look at ourselves if we're accusing other places of being very conservative. But
true. I will take issue with both of those varies. I don't think we are very liberal ever.
No,
and I don't.
Right.
From modern other countries, we're not very conservative either.
No, that's fair. But I just think that, like, I agree with you saying that U.S. and China are like pretty similar threat.
Yes. And both of those countries, I know a lot of Americans don't want to hear it, but you're very similar. Very similar.
Also, China, not as far away as we think. Because I think a large amount of like the fear comes from the fact that they're far away and a lot of people haven't been there. Like,
sure,
you're not going to that part of the world very often. And so I think that but they're not as far as we think they are. And I think their reaches are a lot closer than we give them credit for.
Well, yeah, everyone loves China when they're just buying their cheap electronics. But then we're like, oh, yeah, but we don't want to know anything about how this was made. We just want to benefit from it. But you know what? This is a very different... I could go on for a very long time. You know, I have a lot of thoughts on it. But let's just go back into the movie.
Oh, yeah, movie.
And Jet Li himself said, Zhang Yimou wanted to explore the kind of person that can become a hero within the frameworks of fighting, politics, romance, and jealousy. Is it the conquering king, the assassins, the killer of the assassins? Perhaps all of them can be considered heroes if highly misguided. So if that's someone who worked on the movie and is the lead saying like, yeah, it's not a clear black and white here. I don't think this is this Chinese propaganda film. I think it is a film made by a director who needed to work within a framework. If he made this very anti-government, it just wouldn't have gotten made. So he has to work within that, just as we do, just as you couldn't do a very critical American movie on a big budget either. There are so many stipulations that are a part of filmmaking in any country, if you were doing it on a large budget, that this is not unique to China. It is just something that we have grown so accustomed to in American cinema that it's just part of it. Of course, every superhero movie is going to be very pro-American. That's what they all are, and that's what they all will be if they continue to be made in the American system with a lot of money. So this is no different. And that's not to say that, so this can be forgiven for everything. I think this is special because in certain readings, and readings that I tend to agree with, this can be seen as very critical of such a thing rather than an endorsement of it. And I think that our real heroes are not the king. It's Nameless and Snow and Broken Sword, and to a lesser extent, I guess, Sky and Moon, those ones who have sacrificed themselves for peace, not for the king. They are not laying down their lives in service of the king. They are laying down their lives in service of something they hope greater will come along after their death. Mm-hmm. And I think that when it's paired with the modern Chinese government, we have a reading of it of that as pro-authoritarian. Had this been an American movie where everyone is sacrificing themselves for some inherent peace, we wouldn't have that same reading. But of course, it is a product of modern China. So I think you could look at it as something that is not going to upset the censor board, but still is something that does not take a pro-authoritarian stance, but just pacifism.
Yeah.
And authoritarianism and pacifism tend not to go along well together, so I don't think this is a pro-authoritarian movie. But what do you think?
I don't know. I have a hard time with this kind of movie making a decision because I don't immediately think about that kind of thing. And I feel like I'm not immediately jumping to like, is this or isn't it?
But you know what? Then you have a unique perspective then, because to you, did this jump out as being like
a propaganda kind of movie? No.
So I think that is very telling then.
No, it didn't. And I think that I really what jumped out at me was the artistry, the beauty of it, and the differentness from other movies that I watch, I guess. And I think that it was, I don't know if just a story is the right like phrase to put on this, but like I feel like it didn't ever come up as like propaganda or not, which I know, like knowing a little bit about China and everything, like I know that like most things that come out of China are propaganda now.
I also don't know if I fully agree with that, unless you were to say, yeah, most things coming out of the United States are propaganda, which
100%.
then I would say, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of things now are propaganda, and we always maybe we, not you and I, but like people tend to think like, oh, propaganda, that happened in World War II.
No.
Propaganda is still a very big thing in our lives, and we really need to be like kind of mindful of it, especially in current circumstances, because a lot of what we're hearing is it's just propaganda for one side or the other, or like one argument or another.
Most commercials, I feel, they really get into nationalism on when they're just selling like potato chips. It's wild.
Oh, 100%. And I think that a lot of people are like, yeah, that happened in 1940. And you're like, no, that's not where propaganda ended. And I think that I can see the argument for this being propaganda, but it didn't come across that way to me. And I think maybe that's just how I watched it. But I think that I can see the argument for propaganda.
So to finish this, because, yeah, you could read it either way, and I love to hear from people who disagree, but the very last shot is a shot of the Great Wall of China with a rising sun. And rising sun, dawn of a new era. But of course, this shot must be from much later because the wall has been built.
Yes.
And they started it, but it took like many
decades.
Emperors? Did they turn into emperors after a certain point? Yeah, I think that's the right word, because he was the king, but then he became the emperor of the 7 United Kingdoms. My history's not good. But so he was the first to unite them or have them united under him and started the Great Wall of China. So that last shot is the rising sun and the wall. And some text comes up and says that the king has accomplished the unification of China. And maybe it even mentions something about the Great Wall but how China essentially came to be. Mm-hmm. But the camera then tilts down into the darkness, and you could say that it's showing the wall, which is a symbol of unified China, I guess, but it's also a symbol of like keeping people out.
I never thought of the wall being unified China,
but we are not Chinese.
No, true.
And so you could argue that it's unified China because it took many emperors to complete this. It wasn't just like one emperor built it in the end. Right. It took hundreds of years, I assume. I also, again, don't know my history all that well. But so you could say that this is a point of Chinese pride and it's showing that. But the lighting and the fact that it's no longer focusing on a rising sun, but rather the darkness, gives it a little bit more of a sinister feel. And I'm not reading into it historically, but rather just the visuals I'm getting on the screen. It made it seem like, oh, this isn't necessarily a great thing. Mm-hmm. But that's just what the screen was giving me, because you get a feeling of darkness. The wall and the mountains are backlit, it's shadowy, and it's kind of showing that this symbol of a unified China has some darkness to it as well. At least that's how I saw it.
Whoa, man. You always come up with the best, final thought.
Oh, it was the last shot of the movie, so it made sense. Well, we should probably end it there because this went longer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, we chatted for a while.
So, final thoughts?
I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's a very cool movie just to watch. If you watch this movie and you don't read all the subtitles, you're still going to enjoy it.
There's some kind of highlight reels out there on YouTube where it's just called The Beauty of Hero. Just watch those. The shots are so gorgeous.
It is a gorgeous movie. I think that the relationships portrayed in this movie are also very well done. And I think that it's a very interesting period of time to capture. And also just the inclusion of the Great Wall at the end, really makes you think about kind of Chinese history. So I think it's a watch.
This is going to be hard when we do our year-end awards.
Oh, yeah.
Because best visuals, you got Hero, you got In the Mood for Love.
Yeah.
2 Christopher Doyle movies.
It's hard
2 Tony Leung, Maggie Cheung movies too. Man, which one looks better?
Set of awards.
Those are 2 of the best looking movies I've ever seen.
Oh, 100%.
Wow. Well, listen for that in like 12-ish episodes or something. I don't know what episode this is. Next week, we're just going to do a rebroadcast because we are on vacation. So let's do something weird. How about the lake house?
Great.
Because there's no other way that's going to come up.
No, you're right.
So yeah, we'll watch the lake house next week.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everybody.